Hey, Sub here. It's been a bit of an eventful week on the timeline for Call of Duty news. We've had, today's delay of season three, so AKA the return of Verdansk, shifting from March 20th, the expected date, to April 3rd, per Call of Duty itself on social media today. But we've also had some interesting news in the last couple of days. We've had uh, we had the announcement a few days ago that cheap provider Phantom Overlay was actually going to be shutting down in the next couple of weeks, and that got me to thinking, how has the cheap provider industry been holding up over the last little while? It's been noisier than usual since I started paying attention. We would see an announcement of a cheap provider being detected and or switching over to something else, maybe once every 6 months, twice a year, something like that. And a lot of times they'd be related to each other, right? So resellers selling the same, people reselling the same cheats, that get detected, right? So a couple of different names go down and then they come back up, and a lot of times they'll just switch names and resell under a different name. However, today, before I, sat down to record this, another cheap provider got shut down, and it got me thinking, how busy have we been this year in terms of cheap providers and, either being shut down or detected? And, what does that say about the environment and what's going on? And in looking at the list, I came to a couple of kind of realizations slash, some hunches of what's happening. And so I'll get into those in a minute, but I wanted to kind of go through this timeline here of the of the cheap providers going on. I just have a kind of a scroll here of all the shutdown notices going on. Glorious to see. I'm sure everybody's excited about it. But I went back to the start of the year, and I follow a lot of creators that track this, really track this stuff, and they're tied into it. And I try to be as tied in as possible, to this information. And going back to the start of the year, really kicked off on the end of on New Year's Eve, when Phantom Overlay, Ziebler Phantom Overlay announced he was taking Phantom Overlay private. So he was effectively not taking on any more customers, and he, and all of his, the Discord and all of that was being, limited to members only, right? Kind of a big move. Phantom Overlay has been probably the largest and most well-respected cheap provider out there for a long time. Certainly since the days of engine, the late days of the engine owning era. And it got me thinking, what is going on, right? What is the status of cheap providers? So if you remember back about 9-10 months ago, Call of Duty actually won their lawsuit against engine owning, and had them charged with racketeering charges, right? RICO charges. And one of the things that kind of perked my interest with that is when you file racketeering charges, there's a lot of teeth that go into that, and a lot of people, a lot of options that Activision would have, or Microsoft in this case would have. And I predicted back then that, hey, this was going to make a dent, or at least make a change in how Activision approached things, because up until then there really hadn't been much in the way of litigation against cheap providers for video games. It just wasn't a thing, right? It had never been tried before. And during that battle, engine owning really took the attitude of, we don't care what you have to say. We are going to do what we do. And they were very public about basically giving the finger to Activision Call of Duty, and then later Activision Microsoft, which is, it is a way to approach things when facing racketeering charges from an American, an American court. And ultimately, their lawyer quit partway through, and then they just basically stopped showing up and lost by default. But it isn't how they lost necessarily. It's the fact that they got to that point, and that that the court was willing, especially the Ninth Circuit was willing to entertain racketeering charges against a cheat provider. This is something that really hadn't been handled much at all. I think Epic brought one case against a provider shortly before Activision brought theirs, and they wrapped it up also with a win, which really, in a lot of ways, alters how it alters how legal departments can handle cheat providers. Before that, it was a lot of soft notices, a lot of kind of threats, but no follow through, because nothing, there was no evidence, right? There's no evidence that a court would even accept such a case, much less find in their favor, right? That's kind of the important thing when you talk about lawsuits and whether you can or can't sue somebody. You can sue a lot of people for a lot of different things, but being successful on that is a totally different story, right? You need to have a good legal understanding of your rights and of the law when you bring a lawsuit, and with the intent of winning. And so for video game companies, there just hasn't been much in the way of lawsuits against cheat providers and people that do this stuff. Most of it has revolved honestly around DMCA activity, right? Which is usually just they send takedown notices and you have to take your site offline. And that's been a lot of the work. And so there's been a lot of like rebranding and the old joke, the revolving door of cheat providers, right? They send a takedown notice to one and they just change the name on their website, put up a new website, and boom, they're right back in action. And that's really how it's been up until now. But after this, so that's been about 9 months. And if you rewind it to the start of the year, that's, it's about 6 months, which is, in the legal world, that's not a very long time, right? Law takes a long time to do anything, especially here in the United States. And when you look at what we have seen this year, starting with Phantom Overlay going private, that's really been a very different environment for cheat providers, I think. And I've gone back and unfortunately Twitter search is not working properly, but I have kind of scrolled back through a number of people's profiles who track this stuff, and I can't find a 3-month span like we've had to start this year in terms of detections and shutdowns, right? We'll get a couple spurts, like I've said before. And look, if I miss one, if you don't see one of these pop up on this scroll, or I don't talk about it, please put that in the comments, and drop that follow along with it. Trying to push the numbers up here a little bit, but definitely need to see, trying to gather as much as I can. And it's hard to pull it all together into one place. I haven't seen like a repertoire of shutdown cheat providers anywhere, so I figured I'll start one here. But starting on the 31st, right? Starting the new year, right? PO goes private. Then on the 4th, Inferno gets shut down via a legal order. And then on the 19th of January, you have Silent and VIP both get detected. Then on the 31st, four different providers go down: Densho, Black Diamond, Silent Chair, and Umbra, all shut down via legal challenges. February started off. AC Diamond gets detected on the 2nd, and then FA Services gets detected on the 6th. Both of those are back up again. On February 22nd, 2Second and Tom were both shut down. Again, legal action driving both of those. And then on March 1st, Phantom Overlay, Ziebler from Phantom Overlay takes to social media and announces that he is actually going to shut down Phantom Overlay 32 days from that date, which was kind of an odd choice. And that was, and it wasn't, he posted on social media, and yeah, that lands on April 1st. So that was kind of a question mark, but he also posted that inside his private Telegram. And so people that are in there have sent me screenshots of it. So I was able to verify that he did indeed tell his customers that they are, they are out the door as well. And they have stopped payment on that. And he's done a variety of different actions to back up the validity of it, to make it clear that this was in fact real, right? This wasn't just him pulling a joke on it. It's, early April Fools, haha. No, it does appear that he's shutting down on April 1st. Now, I thought that was very strange because, 32 days is a weird time, but, it is what it is. And then, of course, on March 3rd, solo queue services shut down. So today, we had another shutdown. All right. So that brings us to, in the year, 9 shutdowns, like one is pending, but 9 shutdown announcements and 4 detections in, not, in just over 2 months. That's gotta be a Call of Duty record, to be honest. I don't think I have seen them be this aggressive against providers ever. And certainly not in a way that encourages these providers to shut down via legal threats. Engine owning famously gave the middle finger to Call of Duty and Activision. And it cost them pretty dearly. That enterprise has changed hands multiple times. And they are on, I think, their 9th different website, and they are basically gone from Twitter, and hanging on by a thread, and not really well respected from people that I've talked to that do use cheats. So, going well for them. But I think, as I mentioned, that opened up the door for, very strong litigation. And so I kind of surmised that was the threat of that looming, was something that Phantom Overlay was feeling the pressure of, and that, hence they went private and kind of started to take a little bit of a lower profile on them. But with the announcement today that they are pushing back season 3, aka Verdansk, I think it's an interesting question about what they, what do people know that the rest of us don't? Because, that timing is either incredibly coincidental, or there was a tip off along the way that, hey, this is getting pushed back and maybe you should rethink it. I would not be surprised. People have insiders all over the place. It's not a far reach to say that some employee, might be sending information here and there, maybe not anything important, right? I know a lot of people suspect, there's a long-standing accusation that Call of Duty, they develop the cheats themselves, and or they sell the code base to developers. I don't believe that to be true, but it could definitely be that there's a source on the inside, someone that will give out dates like, hey, the anti-cheat's getting updated tomorrow, watch out for that, stuff like that. And it could be completely coincidental, right? I don't know any more than what has publicly come out, so I'm just guessing based on timelines and facts and conversations that I've had with various people over the last year or so on the topic, including Ziebler himself. He hasn't told me anything special about this. I'm just, putting pieces together. But I think it's definitely stands to reason that there's something, something more than he's just moving on, right? It seems very peculiar to me. And I think that provides, I think this episode and the amount of action that they're taking does 2 things to provide. I don't want to call it hope. I think we in the Call of Duty, the longtime Call of Duty community, are past using the phrase hope. But at least providing a opportunity, that's probably not the right word either. I'm just going to call it hope because, we're fools. We keep playing this game. But the hope that Activision actually has something in the works that launches with season 3 that is going to make somebody who is talented, as talented as Ziebler and his Phantom Overlay team are, and I believe it's just him, but don't quote me on that, to decide that they are not going to tangle with it, right? Like, that to me is a sign that there might be optimism to be had here on the situation. Would it eradicate everything? Of course not. Look at Valorant. Valorant deals with cheaters on the regular, and they have very, very aggressive and very, very well endowed anti-cheat. and a staff dedicated to it, right? And so, they deal with cheaters on the regular, right? So it's not that there aren't cheaters there. It's much harder to accomplish, and so there are significantly fewer of them. In Call of Duty, the anti-cheat has been largely a bit of a joke because it's easy to bypass. And so I think that, there's hope that they are working on ultimately an anti-cheat that doesn't give up the ghost, right? That doesn't, get blindsided as frequently as Ricochet does. And so my hope is that, Ziebler shutting down Phantom Overlay, a bunch of these cheat providers getting shut down, a number of detection picking up, the number of detections picking up this year, is going to be an indication that Call of Duty, Activision, and Microsoft collectively are taking the anti-cheat seriously now. It's not just a rubber stamp, an afterthought, something they've tossed on, added on just for the fun of it. But instead, they're going to use all of the resources that they have at their disposal, which is a massive number of resources. There should be no reason that Call of Duty and Activision are getting blindsided, right, by cheap developers. They have the resources to build a fantastic anti-cheat, and they know they can do it. They know that it's possible because Valorant can do it. So hopefully we are going to see in the next couple of weeks a ramping up of this, and then a deployment of what I hope to be an always-on anti-cheat, an anti-cheat that is capable of stopping these threats and stopping these detections, or generating detections and eliminating the cheaters from the game as much as possible. That's a bit of a foolhardy, optimistic look, but with Verdansk coming, I think it's at least plausible that such a thing exists. I think it's plausible that whatever it is has caused Ziebler to take a look at the cheating industry and his place in it and decide that that's not going to be worth his time and not going to end well for him if he continues it. I hope that there is a very strong response from Activision with Season 3. And hopefully when we get to Verdansk, when Verdansk drops on the 3rd of April, that we are going to actually get to have a good experience with it. That's, from a cheating perspective, that's what I would like to see. And I hope we can. And looking forward to that day, because this might be Warzone's last chance. So let's see what Activision's got cooking, and keep an eye on those cheat developers. Hopefully more of them get shut down between now and then. All right. Catch you on the next one.